Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bowen Stewart and welcome to the 2020 OWF Coaching Seminar. Today we have Mr. Lynn Jones here to talk to us, but before we do that, I'll pass it over to the OWF General Secretary, Mr. Paul Coffer. Thank you, Paul.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Melbourne today, where we are on a lockdown for the last 2.5 months, and I don't know where we're going from here. It might last until the end of the year. It's a terrible situation. As a General Secretary of the Oceania Weightlifting Federation, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this coaching seminar today. Coronavirus pandemic has caused so many problems around the world. Our sport has suffered so much. Many of our lifters have not been able to train in their own gymnasiums and under their own coaches. So therefore, this coaching seminar online is, for the moment, the only way that we are able to assist our member countries, especially all the individual lifters. The speaker today is none other than Mr. Lynn Jones. I've known Lynn since the late 60s, and believe me, that's a long, long time. The majority of you were not even born then. Lynn was the president of the Oceania Weightlifting Federation from 1983 to 1992. He was a weightlifting head coach at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra from 1980 to 1989, producing so many world-class lifters. Lynn moved to USA and became the national coaching director, and he coached Tara Holt to gold at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney. He returned back home to Australia in 2003, and he spent the last, I think, 15 to 16 years conducting coaching seminars and courses in Australia, week after week. Obviously, the last 6 months, nothing has happened due to the coronavirus. I consider Lynn as one of the leading coaches in the world of weightlifting, and I'm very, very pleased to see him running this seminar today. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying it.
Thank you, Paul. And without further ado, Mr. Lynn Jones.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Jones, and it's my pleasure to talk to you today about coaching and weightlifting. Some of you might know who I am, but there'll be many who probably don't. So I thought it would be a reasonable thing to do to give you a brief introduction about myself. As far as the Oceania Weightlifting Federation is concerned, I founded the organization in 1980. I was General Secretary for 4 years, and I was President for 8 years. I've held positions with the International Weightlifting Federation. I was on the Executive Board for 8 years. I was on the Technical Committee for 4 years, and on the Coaching and Research Committee for 16 years, and I'm still on it at the moment. I worked at 9 Olympic Games, 10 Commonwealth Games, and 47 World Weightlifting Championships. Not all of them as a coach, in various positions there, from coach, team manager, referee, announcer, and many other technical positions. I was national team coach in 3 nations: United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States of America. Now, that's all very well, but I always judge coaches by, well, what have you produced as a coach? So I guess this is what I did. I was personal coach of 5 Olympic team members, 4 junior world medalists, 5 Commonwealth Games medalists, of which 2 were gold, 1 Pan American Games gold medalist, and 1 Olympic gold medalist, which is my greatest achievement. And it was the first woman ever to win an Olympic gold medal for weightlifting And nobody is ever going to be able to top that, and because that was the first time. Okay, well, thank you for your attention. Let's move in now to the actual talk I want to give you about weightlifting coaching. And if we look at the sport of weightlifting, I'm asking the question, is it the ultimate power sport? And for sure it is, if we believe what measurements will show us, probably the sport that produces the greatest power output. But what is power? Power is measured as force times speed, or force applied at speed. It's measured in watts. So consequently, powerlifting, which as we know is a well-patronized sport, really is wrongly named because with all due respect to powerlifters, they're not the fastest guys in the world because the weights they lift are enormous and they can't be lifted quickly. In France, they call it force lifting, which I think is probably a better term. But we'll never change the terminology of powerlifting now, so we'll have to go along with it. And no disrespect to powerlifters at all. Speed, however, is integral to be a successful weightlifter. It's been researched that if we're going to succeed in snatching a barbell, it's got to be traveling at least 1.7 meters per second. If it isn't going that fast, you fail, or your athletes fail. And similarly, the clean, once again, it doesn't travel over such a great distance, and it must be traveling at between 1.4 and 1.5 meters per second. However, most competitors make the bar move a lot quicker than that. You're looking around the 2 meters per second for most successful weightlifters. It's only the very, very select few who really can snatch and clean with the relatively lower speeds. Though I must say, when I was in China a couple of years ago, talking to their coaches there with their national team, they were very, how can I say, proud of the fact that they had two lifters in their team who could successfully snatch a barbell that was only going 1.6 meters per second. But they were very tiny weightlifters, I can assure you, and the bulk of the team were working in the area which I've been talking about. Now, it's certainly our task as coaches to prepare our weightlifters in such a way that the speeds we're talking about can be achieved, and when they're lifting the heavier weights. And this is really the coach's responsibility. We have a responsibility for our lifters. They might tell us otherwise, but that's very much the truth. And if the weights, the lifters we coach are not increasing, and if they're dedicated lifters, then really it's our fault. And we've got to up our game so that they can keep improving. Okay. Consequently, certainly as coaches, we're striving all the time to make the technique of our lifters as efficient as possible. It's not an easy task, we know that. It's a challenge every day. My question now is, are there people out there who can help us? Well, not necessarily coaches. Now, certainly sports scientists throughout our sport, and especially ones who specialize in sports biomechanics, can really contribute immensely to our work and success. I've been fortunate enough over the years to work with some very highly qualified sports biomechanists, and I found them extremely useful. And the people in that area of sports science, they love weightlifters. Why? Because we don't go anywhere. We're right there throughout, so they can measure us. We're easy to measure in comparison to, say, other sports where people are running around in courts or jumping or throwing things. Well, we just stay there. Our effort is in really up and down. So they've been able to get a lot of useful information that can benefit us. Now, certainly any information gathered from sports scientists is not going to replace your, as I term it, coaching eye. We all over time develop, because we've been watching and involved with weightlifting, what I call a coaching eye, which enables us to evaluate the lifters who are in front of us. Certainly with the speed of movement that we're seeing from our lifters, very often it's so fast that unless we get some kind of scientific measurement, it's going to be very difficult for us to identify any problems. If we can't see them, we can't identify them. We see results of technical problems easily. Oh, the bar dropped in front, the bar dropped behind. Didn't even reach the correct height. We see the result, but our job as a coach to identify as to why that happened. What was the cause of that? Now, sports science can really help us here. And if you think that the most successful weightlifting countries are not using sports science, you're dreaming. And they've been using it for years. It's not just something that's happened over the last 10, 20 years. You can go right back to even the days of when the Bulgarians came through very strongly. And Abadjiev was the coach, envied by the world until he fell from disgrace. But his sports scientist, Fornadjev, who I was fortunate enough to hear lecture and show me the apparatus he'd used to analyze the technique of the Bulgarian lifters. He was a very informative and smart man. Now, currently, certainly, the most successful nation in the world in weightlifting at the moment, and possibly for the last few years, has been China. And looking at the overall world scene, it looks as if they're probably going to be there for a while, especially the way they've got the sport organized within China, which I've been fortunate enough to visit on several occasions on behalf of the International Federation. And I've seen the incredible amount of work that they are doing with their lifters with the application of sports science. And when we look at the technique of the bulk of the Chinese team, it is extremely efficient. And that's not by accident. It's because whatever problems they were initially finding, sports scientists have helped the coaches identify them. Then the coaches can put together combative movements to correct things that are going wrong. So certainly the sports science around the world was pioneered really by the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. Now we have 15 nations that were part of the Soviet Union, many of whom are extremely good in our sport. But they pioneered using sports science to a high degree to produce the great success which they had. Now, certainly as far as China is concerned, Mr. Cao Wenyuan, who is their sports biomechanist, look, this guy is as close to a genius as you're ever going to meet. He's an extremely nice guy. And what's even more dumbfounding is the fact that he speaks beautiful English. Not only that, but he can speak Hungarian, would you believe? A very difficult language. Why? Because he did a university course in Hungary many years ago. And certainly the work Mr. Cao has been doing with the Chinese team is the most up-to-date sports science work of anywhere in the world. I was at a presentation he made just last December when the International Weightlifting Federation Coaching and Research Committee visited the National Training Center in Beijing, and he was able to show what he'd been doing to them. But I'd seen what he was doing some 4 years before when I was touring around with the IWF when we did a tour of China to observe their system. Now, there you can see Mr. Cao Young-won, and myself, and also a member of their national team. This took place on a Sunday when I was actually leaving China that night. And Mr. Cao invited me to come and have a look at his testing machine, which I'll talk about in a moment. The national team wasn't training at the time because, believe it or not, they get Sundays off. But this young fella was kind enough to come in and do some lifts so that Mr. Cao could show me what his machine can do. Now, if you look on the screen, you'll see the a picture of the actual machine. It shows some of the things that it actually measures. And it is mind-blowing to see what it can measure. It's completely portable, and it can be pushed around the gym, platform to platform. There has to be nothing attached to the barbell or the weightlifter. And the measurements are produced absolutely straight away. It can measure the path of the barbell. It can measure the speed of the bar. It can measure the force being produced. And what we're talking about, the power being produced. How powerful are these movements? There's also a myriad of other information. I'm not going to go through the whole lot. I mean, it can trace what your knee's doing during a lift simultaneously. Now, the coach can immediately, sees a lift, have a look at the machine, study any aspect of that lift that he wants to. He can share this with the lifter. You can ask the lifter to come over. Now, take a look at this. This is what I've been telling you. Now see what I said has been right. And the lifter can't argue. He's got to get back and do something about it. Having said that, when I was there with Mr. Cao on this Sunday, I did point out to him that research I'd done in the United States with the sports biomechanists at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, we'd identified that if you filmed or videoed the barbell or measured the barbell from each side, there was very often a variance of what's happening on one side of the lifter from the other. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for this. You found yourselves in your coaching experience, I am sure, that you'll find some lifters, when they lift the bar, they move one foot sideways far more than the other one. What does that mean? It means they are transferring weight onto one foot, and then the other foot can move a lot quicker and faster. This often comes about after an injury, maybe to that leg or that side of the body or whatever. I suggested this to Mr. Cao, and the very nice guy that he is took it on board and said, yeah, I'm sure you're right. And when we went back to the National Training Center in December 2019, he'd already fixed that up, and he was working now with 2 cameras so we could get both sides of the bar. And they found that illuminating too. So maybe I made a small contribution there, which of course I'm very proud of. Okay, now biomechanists can certainly measure power in different ways. Not everybody got Mr. Cao's machine. In fact, right now, only China has it. The machine itself, the information, of course, comes up in Mandarin, which is their language, which I do under no circumstances speak or understand. And during our visit there last December, the coaching committee was so impressed with the machine, they certainly asked Mr. Cao, now, can you get the information on it translated back into English so we could use the machine? And of course, he speaks perfect English. So he certainly said, look, we're going to work on this. And when I mentioned this to the acting president, or is it the intermediate, what our term is, as our current president of the IWF, interim president, that's the word I was looking for, Ursula Papandreou, she was very enthusiastic about this and even spoke to the International Coaching Committee on our recent meeting about how good it would be to have one of these machines in each continental federation as a starter, if indeed we can get this thing put into English. Of course, what we don't know is how much it costs. I cannot believe it's going to be cheap, that's for sure. So maybe Ursula will have to rethink the situation when eventually the cost comes out. Now, checking out power measurements in the following research, which has been done over many years. My good friend, Professor John Garhammer, really pioneered this in the United States when he went to the World Championships, which happened to be at that time in the United States, and measured the power production of groups of weightlifters. Now, if we check that out, this is what John found. The power production in our lifts. Overall, in the snatch, the power production was 3,000 watts. But what is far more important, if we look at what we call the explosion phase, which is really the finish of the pull, this jumps to 5,500 watts, which is dramatically high power production. And if we look across at the ladies, at the time, ladies weightlifting was not as advanced as it is now, but they followed a similar pattern. The snatch 1,750 watts, but in the explosion phase, nearly 3,000. I would suggest that if we did this research again with our current weightlifters, we'd find them approaching the men's power production. If we look at the clean, we see that it tends to mimic the snatch, a little bit lower power production in overall. Why? Because weights are heavier, barbells doesn't travel as far, but in the explosion phase, whoa, it's right up there again, 5,500 watts. So certainly it would appear that the explosion phase, the finish of the pull, is dramatically important to the lifter themselves and us as coaches. We look at the jerk, we can see also the power production is pretty dramatically high there too. Okay, so this can help us certainly in our coaching. Certainly the final phase of the pull, as we've termed the explosion phase, we need to give that bar momentum so it'll keep going up as the lifter moves down into the snatch and clean. It's got to give the athlete time to get under the bar. And if we've given it sufficient power in the finish of the explosion phase of the pull, that bar will keep coming up. Gravity will win eventually. No two ways about that. That bar's going to come down. We know that. But the more power we can give that explosion phase, the longer it's going to stay in a position where we can get under it. Now, we've got to train our lifters for sure to maximize the power created in the final explosion phase. Now, to do this, our technique has got to be as efficient as possible. We've got to look at the athlete as a machine, if you like, and look at the most efficient way we can use the body of a human being to produce this kind of power in this phase of our skill in lifting. So, correct technique, sure. Let's have a look at the snatch. What are we going to ensure that our lifters do? Most of you will know this and are doing it anyway, but we've got to emphasize it. Feet about hip width apart. This varies a little bit with lifters. Most people find if you turn the toes slightly out, it's more comfortable and they can exert force more comfortably, if you like. Certainly, we've got to use the hook grip, and the arms have got to be straight and relaxed and the elbows rotated out. The back's got to be set tight. It's no good setting it and during the pull. It's got to be set before we start the pull. A deep breath helps, and the chest is inflated. This presses down on the diaphragm, which presses down into the abdominal cavity, which braces the lower back. We're going to make sure this happens. We'll see lifters who don't do this, and they suffer because of it. We've got to keep the shoulders over the bar, and the hips have got to be higher than the knees. What does that look like? Let's see the photograph on the left there. The barbell is just coming off the deck. Look, the arms are straight, the elbows are rotated out, the hips are higher than knees, the back's set tight, the lifter's looking straight ahead. That's a great starting position. Now from there, what's going to be the next movement? The initial movement to break the inertia of the barbell. The barbell wants to stay on the platform. It's happy there. We've got to disturb it. And to do that, we need to use probably our strongest muscle groups, which are quadriceps. So we extend the legs. Leg extension, as we can see in the second and the third photograph there, brings the barbell to knee height. The back angle hasn't changed. The back's still in that same as the starting position. Now from there, we have to, if you like, change gears because we've used the strength of the legs to bring it to knee height. During this lift up, the bar's kept as close as possible because at the start, if we look back at that, you can see the knees are pushing forward. That bar's going to be resting really over the front part of the foot. When the legs extend, that barbell needs to come back towards the lifter. We keep it as close as possible. But once the legs have done that extension phase, now we're looking at a change of muscle action to keep the barbell moving up. It's a change of gears, if you like. As the hips extend, as we'll see now in the next slide, as the hips extend, the legs rebend again slightly. And you can say, well, and there was once upon a time a great hoo-ha about this, the double knee bend. How do we teach this? You don't teach it. It's going to happen correctly if you're using the lift off in the correct way. The reason the legs rebend again is because you're going to start using very strongly and violently the hamstrings. Now they originate up in the hips, but they're inserted below the knee. So when they tense up under stress, they tend to rebend the knees. And we can use this to advantage. Now from there, the lifter is going to move into a position as the hips extend into the final explosion phase. Very important, by the way, to stay on flat feet throughout this. If you start to go up on the balls of the feet too early, that barbell is going to go away from the lifter. They're going to be in trouble. Now we can see here, as the barbell's past the knees, the hips have extended, not completely. The legs have rebent again. The back's very tight, as you can see. This young man, who's probably the best weightlifter in the world at the moment, Liu Jiajun of China, he's ready now to explode up. His arms are straight, his elbows are rotated out, his feet are flat on the deck, his legs are rebent, his hips haven't fully extended. He's ready to go. And from there, the lifter explodes upwards. 4 things have got to happen at once. And the timing of this is crucial to maximize the power of the movement. The ankles have got to extend. He's been on flat feet up to now. The ankles extend, the legs fully extend, the hips fully extend, and the shoulders are shrugged up. Trapezius muscles are very powerful. Let's use them. All in one action. And this produces maximum power. And the arms are still straight and the elbows are rotated out. A good maxim to remember is, when the arm bends, the power ends. And we're after producing power. You can't do upright rowing with world record snatches and cleans. In the old days when the coaches used to say, pull it hard and stamp your feet, they had no idea what they were talking about and were probably making us worse weightlifters than we would otherwise have been. So we know a little bit more about things nowadays, and we've got to use it to advantage. Now, once this has taken place, then we can see the finish of the explosion phase here. They use 3 lifters who are, I think all of them world champions, and check them all out. The ankles have extended, the knees have extended, the hips have extended, the arms are dead straight on all of them. They're shrugging the shoulders as hard as they can. And from there, then they're going to try, and the barbell will continue on its upward path, which hopefully is going to give them enough time to pull themselves down under the bar. That's what we use the arms for. The momentum of the barbell will continue in its upward path. As I mentioned before, gravity's going to win. While this is taking place, the lifter usually jumps their feet into the squatting stance, which is very often different from the foot position when they're pulling the barbell. And then using the arms, they pull themselves down under the bar. In other words, they accelerate their descent. They go under the bar much quicker if they use their arms to accelerate themselves down and under the bar. And then arrive in the receiving position here in the snatch, where we've got barbell, shoulders, hips, feet pretty much all in one line. Now, if they pull it correctly, the barbell shouldn't be going back, shouldn't be coming forward, should be coming down vertically down to them. They don't wait for the barbell to come down, by the way. As they're moving under it, then they punch up against the barbell. They're not going to press behind the neck. All this enormous weight, in which we see these 2 very, very competent weightlifters lifting. But by the action of punching up against the bar, they push themselves down into this very deep receiving position. Okay, so here we are. The bar is now received overhead, and lifters punched up against the arms, and I'm emphasizing the fact that this ends, the lifter ends up in a very solid receiving position. And from here, as I'm sure we all coach our lifters, take your time getting up. Don't try and get up too quickly. Very often it is so very easy to lose balance on the recovery from the snatch if we try and be too hasty. And we see many snatches lost, unfortunately, due to exuberance of the athlete when they think they've actually made it. Okay, so we've looked at the snatch in terms of power production. And I've got an idea of what we're going to be aiming to do. Let's take a look now at the clean. Sorry, look, I'd forgotten. Here is the full movement, which you need to have a look at it because it certainly exemplifies all the things I've just been mentioning. Check out the first 3 photographs on the top line there, and you can see Aram now has extended his legs, brought the barbell up to knee height, but his back angle is the same. Now he's attempting to extend the hips, and he does it very successfully. And we see in that 5th photograph where he's in the explosion phase, he's ready to explode up. And that's what he does in the 6th slide. He's right up there. He's reaching up as hard as he possibly can, extending ankles, knees, hips, and shoulders shrugging. In the first photograph in the lower row, he's starting to move his feet. He's finished exerting force on the barbell, but that bar still keeps going up. And as we see, he's moving under the bar very quickly. He lands in that 3rd photograph, but his arms aren't straight yet. He punches up against the barbell and he hits that extremely deep and low receiving position, very secure, and then he can recover and for a successful lift. And 184 kilogram snatch is not a bad lift. Okay, let's now look at the clean. Certainly, we certainly hope we're going to be cleaning more weight than we can snatch. Few weightlifters are challenged by this question, although we do have one in Australia who's struggling with this at the moment, but let's not get into personalities. The pull for the clean is very similar, certainly, the pull for the snatch. The weight's heavier, the grip width is narrower, and we're still using the hook grip, that's for sure. And because of this narrower grip, the back angle is probably slightly different. Not a great deal, but it is slightly different. The movement sequence is as for the snatch: leg extension, hip extension, explosion. Let's have a look here at the start of the lift. Many of our lifters, and I'm sure a lot of yours do too, they want to extend the hip too early. And the back angle changes, and that compromises their power production. So we can see from these three photographs that Albegov, the Russian lifter, extends the legs and the barbell arrives at knee height. His back angle's the same throughout. His arms are straight, his elbows rotated out, and his shoulders are over the bar. He's in a very sound and strong position to move into the next phase, which is going to be the extension of the hips, which, as we know now, because of the hamstring tension, will cause those knees to rebend a little bit. And when we look at the next slide, we can see it's happened. There's the legs have rebent. And once again, our weightlifting hero, Lu Jiajun, is ready to go. And from there, he is going to extend ankles, knees, hips, and shrug the shoulders and exert maximum force on the barbell at speed to produce that maximum wattage that he's looking for, so the bar keep going up to give him time to get under it. So when we look at from that position, he's going to extend, bang, right up there. And this guy, by the way, I think has got one of the most efficient pulling techniques in the world. So if you're going to look at somebody as a model, you could do a lot worse than look at him. I wouldn't emulate his jerk, but the snatch and the clean are exemplary. So there he is at the finish of his explosion phase. And you can say, well, okay, it's all right for him. He's just, 81 kilos. And, well, what about the big guys and smaller people? Well, there's two. One very large man, I think from Iran, and one very small girl from Turkey. Finish position almost identical. So they've exploded correctly. They're exerting maximum force on the barbell and producing massive power at the end of their explosion phase. And from there, they're going to jump the feet apart and pull themselves down. And we can see this lifter doing exactly that. Feet are moving, and as he moves down under the bar to receive the bar in the final receiving position. Once again, it's barbell, hips, and feet in the same line. That barbell is not outside that line. If it was, it would fall off or knock the lifter over. So we've got to make sure that that doesn't take place. Okay, now then, let's look at really final wrap-ups on this. There are many more aspects of technique and of coaching I can obviously speak on, but if we do too much too soon, and you can become overwhelmed very quickly with information. And I would suggest that once Bowen, and I thank Bowen very much for his incredible efforts on the technology of putting these things together, which, believe me, is far, far beyond me, then we can explore, if warranted, many other parts of weightlifting coaching, of which there are, as I'm sure you will agree, a lot of aspects we haven't looked at here. We could be looking at programming of training. We could be looking at selection of lifters with ability, etc., etc. Many things that you guys are doing on a daily basis, I would suggest. A coach's work never seems to be done, because we bring our lifters along in the best possible way we can. And the amazing thing is, coaches tend to last longer than the lifters. A lifter's life is limited. I guess coaches' lives tend to be extended a bit longer than that. So here's a challenge for you. You've got to keep going, because you never know when you're going to strike that jewel of an athlete you're going to be able to take them all the way. And but let's face it, I was 64 until I produced the ultimate weightlifter. So be patient. Be patient. Here we see the receiving position with that barbell again, and a very, very strong position from there. He's got to stand up, so leg strength's got to be paramount. And you can say, well, you've showed a lot of men here. What about the ladies? Well, here's one of the most efficient lady weightlifters in the world, Tatiana Kasharina from Russia. And if we check her out on the technique she's using here, on the clean, I won't go for the jerk right now, which could be another topic for a coaching discussion. We see the barbell has just started off the deck in the first photograph there on the top left, and she extends the legs and brings the bar to the third photograph, and the back angle has remained constant. Now, as the bar passes the knees in the fourth photograph, she's initiating her hip extension. And as we can see there on the fifth photograph, she's now in the position of explosion. I would suggest if there was another slide after that one, we'd see an even more or greater knee bend than is illustrated right there, because it's only just past the knees. Now we see her exploding up in the top right photograph, and in the third row, there's a finish of explosion. It's all happened. Ankle extension, knee extension, hip extension, shoulder elevation. She hit the four things absolutely correctly. And to lift 190 kilos, you've got to get it right, or the barbell will win every time. Now, she jumps her feet apart. She pulls herself down under the barbell, and we can see her there moving down into the receiving position. And for a successful clean, and she goes on and jerks it. Okay, wonderful, efficient movements. So, the final thoughts on this. Correct technique certainly is something we're striving for all the time as coaches, so we can maximize that power production in the explosion phase or the finish of pull in both lifts. Now, if we can continue to increase the force that our lifters can produce, which means we've got to make them stronger, and maintain or increase the speed by which they can exert this force and thus produce more power production through our correct coaching technique programs, higher results should follow. And this is our challenge as coaches. The challenges are always there, and you get one thing right, and within a period of time, other things start to go wrong. You know the challenges, you're doing it every day. And we're continually searching for the cause, we know the result. So keep that in your minds, please. Okay, well, thank you for your attention. And hopefully we'll meet again and we can discuss more areas of coaching that could be beneficial to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And thank you to Mr. Paul Copper, OWF General Secretary, Mr. Marcus Stevens, OWF President, and the IWF for their support for this seminar. If you have any questions, any queries, please reach out to us at the OWF office. Thank you. Bye for now.